Uh, Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. Um, so give me 1 minute to get one thing out of the way on my side. Okay, let's get this moving. So my name is Daniel Reis. I'm currently consultant at the Open Source Integrators European Office. I'm also a board member at the OCA and a longtime member and contributor to the community. And this session today is to help you uh, contribute code to the OCA. So I'm happy that you're here, and I have an agenda prepared for today. So this session will go for about 1 hour and a half, if I'm correct. Um, and this is our agenda for today. So there are several ways for us. Oh, before we get started, I'd just like to remind you. So I'll be taking questions and answering questions. So this is not really a one-way presentation only. We could have some questions and discuss some other topics if I miss me, in case I'm missing some important topics you'd like to see addressed. In that case, the best way to ask a question is to raise your hand. You have a button at the bottom that you can raise your hand, and I'll try to pay attention to the raised hands in the participants list and ask you to then make a question. You then unmute yourself, make the question, and I can try answering it. Okay. So every other time, I ask you to keep your microphone muted. That will work better for everyone. Thank you. Okay, moving along. So this is our agenda for today. And I'll start with discussing some prerequisites necessary to contribute to the OCA. The second topic is first, so if you are a newcomer, where are things? So where is the code, or what is the right place for me to propose my code? So that's topic number two, how the OCA code is organized. The third one is the several ways we have to contribute to code. So not all code contributions are the same. There are several things, different things you can do. You can be migrating modules, you can be proposing completely new module, or you can be just proposing fixes. So what you'll need to do will vary slightly depending on what you are trying to contribute. Uh, the topic number four will focus specifically on migrating modules, things to pay attention or be mindful of when you're migrating modules. There will be a session dedicated only for this. So if you're interested in doing this, I invite you to look at the agenda and attend that session. I think it will be presented by Pedro Baeza. It's also important that this event, we have the talks, but at the origins of our event is really a code sprint. So we'll be having a code sprint and we're having a lot of people working together in improving OCA code. And so after this session, maybe it's a good way to get started is to join a code sprint room. There's a document. You can choose a particular topic. You can contact those people through the Discord chat, and that will help you get even into more details on what I'll give you. So today I'll give you a high-level overview, and I'll give you the pointers to the documents you need to know. I'll answer some questions. So the goal today is to get you on track. Of course, there's some discovery you'll need to do by yourselves. Okay. So the next step, so you know where the code is, you know what you want to do. The next step is to understand the workflow to contribute code. So what are the several steps you need from the moment you begin with your contribution until it gets merged into the OCA repository? And That also involves, so the workflow is not only in Git, but a good part of the workflow involves Git. So I'll explain you, and if you like, we can get into a bit more details on some Git tricks. Different people will have different depth of knowledge of Git, but we could discuss some of the basics to get you started. Then for your code to be accepted, it's important that it follows the code contribution standards, and I'll guide you on the essentials on this. And it's also important to understand the code automated checks. This is something that has been improving a lot, and I'll share with you what's happening now. So what are the checks, and there's also some automatic formatting. So I'll present that to you. And finally, the last step for your code, it's really not the last step. Probably it's the beginning of your journey. It's the code review. So, and you, there, there should be a code review. There should be comments from reviewers, and you should navigate through that step. That's critical to get your contribution merged. Now, code reviews work both ways. Uh, we want to have a lot of code contributions, but we also need a lot of code reviews. So that's also a way for people to contribute that maybe a lot of people are not aware of. Anyone can do code reviews, and I'll go through what we should look at the code reviews and what kind of checks are expected from the reviewers. Finally, details on how to merge pull requests. If you're not a maintainer, you probably won't need to use this. Still, it's good to know. And if you become a maintainer, this is important information for you. Finally, a last topic. I actually don't have a lot of text there, but I think it's important discussing how to incorporate OCA in your delivery workflow. Uh, I have some ideas. I can share a bit how I work on my client projects. The OCA is a part of what we do. So uh, it's not that you build code and contributing it to the OCA is an afterthought. Something that when the project ends, you think about if you should deploy or not. It's the other way around. So the OCA is involved from moment one. We even share the designs before we start developing in the OCA. So I'd like to share with you some of the practices. This is not on any OCA documentation. Actually, there is. I think there's a blog post from Maxime Chambrul that shares this, but I'm not sure it's very well known that the benefits of doing so, and I'd like to discuss this a bit with you. So I'm happy with this agenda. If anyone has some topic they would like to add, you can raise your hand and we can discuss. If everyone is happy with the agenda, we can move on. Okay, I see no hands raised. Okay, let's get started then. So prerequisites to contribute to the OCA. So the first one, it's a barrier. If you don't have it, you must have it. You need to have a GitHub login. So that's a requirement, right? You can't work on GitHub without a GitHub login. I'm hoping that most of you already have one. If you don't, you can go to the sign up page at GitHub and create one. The second thing you need, it's not a something that prevents you from start contributing, but at some point this will be required from you. We need a CLA signed from you or from the organization you work for. So the CLA is a contributor license agreement, and it allows the association to modify the licenses the code is published in case of need. This is not used unless strictly necessary. And when someone asks for changing a license, we open a discussion. We try to contact the authors and contributors of those modules to see if they agree. The license allows us to go ahead with that relicensing in case of some of the contributors are not contactable anymore or don't respond to contacts. So it's not a blocking point if that happens. So this is related to licenses. This is a bit overlooked by a lot of developers, but this is important. The thing is, your code won't be merged if you don't have a valid CLA. Either there's an individual CLA and there's a company CLA that will cover the developers for a company. So this is important. Okay. And there's a CLA bot that will complain that, okay, this author does not have a CLA and you shouldn't go ahead with the merge. It's not a blocking point. It's an information for the maintainers who's going to do the merge. But this is important. We had problems with licenses before, and since we're talking about licenses, one thing not to do is copy code for someone else in the open source and put it in the OCA. So if you do that, you should make sure that the author agrees. And ideally, I think we should even have a CLA from the original author. And if you do that, please don't never change the copyright notices on that original work. That's infringement of even open source licenses. Okay, so always, that's important to remember, always attribute the author's credit for their work. So that's very important. Okay, simple thing. The CLA, it's a piece of, it's a document you need to sign, scan, send back to an email address, and Rebecca will process it and mark it in our database as you have the CLA signed. There's on that page there's some explanation on the why, and you get more information on this there. Okay. Next, last but not least, I invite you, if you're not yet, to become an OCA member or even a delegate. And also, if you can, to become a GitHub sponsor. Why? Because the OCA needs money contributions to be able to keep its infrastructure running, to be able to organize events and support the community in general. So, and we support some projects. We've been partially funding Open Upgrade. So there's a lot of things that the OCA to be able to run needs its funding, and also um, the membership number, the members we have give us relevance and power. So it's different if we have an organization with 10 members or if we have an organization with 1,000 or 10,000 members. So the weight we have in um, the weight we have with Odoo SA and in the community is different. So if you really believe that the OCA is useful and is doing a good work, you should get involved. And if you're already an OCA member, you can step it up. You can candidate yourself to a delegate. Actually, there's an assembly right now. There's people can apply, members can apply to delegates, and the delegates are eligible for being board members. So you can later on candidate for board members, and it's something we would like to have renewal. We want to have, so we recently came to a point where we didn't have enough candidates to fill up the board, and that saddened us. So we'd like more involvement from the people, and we'd like you can participate, you can bring up your ideas to make the OCA better, to improve. So we're going through this process. There are things there that are not as good as they should be, and we invite people to come in and help and contribute, and not only at the code level but even at the OC organization and processes level. We need contributions too. So I hope you get more involved, and help push the OC forward. Okay, now to the main thing. First topic is how the OCA is organized. So newcomers to the OCA, their first problem is where do I submit my module? So where is the OCA code? So it's really quite a huge organization. Um, Let me switch here. Okay, so this is the so this is the OCA homepage. As you see right now, we have 200 repositories. See here, and we have a few pinned ones. And here are the repositories. GitHub will show you this sorted by the latest changes. And you can search for the repositories here. Now, uh, the structure around repositories, we have project steering committees that oversee repositories. So this is like a overseeing board that will is entitled to make decisions on the projects or repositories it oversees. This is not visible in GitHub, but this tells us who are the repository level maintainers for the projects. Then each PSC will oversee one or more repositories on GitHub. So if you see the screen, these are all repositories. Okay. The basic organization for repositories is around main apps. So that's what I think about. It's first, there are maybe a few kinds of repositories. You have the ones organized around apps. Then you have the ones that are localization specific. Those start with L10N. So this is the Thailand localization. This is the Brazil localization. And then you have verticals like vertical association, and but the ones really with a lot of traction are the repositories around applications. So you have repositories around accounting. So you start typing here, and accounting is a very broad topic, so it is divided in subtopics. Each repository will host several modules, and they're not necessarily directly interrelated, but they share a common topic. And when a repository gets too big, it gets hard to manage, and you try to break it up in smaller repositories with dedicated, with a uh, more focused attention. So the accounting area is huge, and we have modules related to the invoicing process, others related to financial tools, others related to financial reports, others just focused on payments, other on analytic accounting, other on reconciliation. So these were several topics that were, there's quite a few here. Okay, so if you go to project or sale, there's a few. So sale app, you have the workflow, so the steps the sale goes through, reports, financial, and so usually I would advise you, so what's the main, if you're contributing a module, what's the main Odoo app it's related to, and I would go here and search for the best repo. Um, If you don't find it or you're not sure, you can locate your best candidate and open an issue with a question there. Or maybe simpler, you can go to the contributors mailing list and ask a question. So I have a model for this and that. What would be the best place to add it? So if you don't get it right, don't worry. I myself have proposed models to one place, and then it came a discussion, and we agreed that it was better in other place. Like recently, we created a module to hide the invoice list from the customer portal, and we proposed it to I believe account invoicing, and someone pointed, actually we proposed it to the website, and actually it was pointed out that this was not a website feature, by the reviewer. It was an accounting, because the accounting portal is part of the accounting app, and it should be in the accounting invoice repo. And we moved the module to that, the pull request to that repository. So it's okay. It's part of the discussion, finding the best place to host. The main thing here, it's there's a logic. So there should be one good place to host each module, depending on what it does and what it depends on. Okay. Okay, I see no raised hands, so I'll look at you. I'm looking at the attendee lists once in a while, see if there are questions there you like to ask. So you're welcome to make questions. Okay, so inside the repositories, you have one branch per Odoo major version. So these are the repos. If you want to contribute, I'm going to pick here the HR. Okay, HR has base generic ones, attendance specific ones, holiday management, expense, those. So this used to be a single repo, and recently it was split in several areas because we saw a lot of modules related to these particular features, and it was broken up in several repos. The thing to um, One important thing to have in mind is that there's a chance that the model that today is hosted in HR expense for version 13 or version 12 might be in this repo, in the source repo for older versions like 8 or 9, 10. So it's important to know that sometimes because of these breakups, the original repo of a module may change with time. Okay. But I'll go. There's a tool to help you browse modules from the OCA. I'll introduce you to that in a moment. Now, let me open the HR. So this is the human resources modules. Uh, so okay, you still see here attendance. I think the breakup was done from version 12 to version 13, and these are the branches. Okay, so we have one branch. So this follows the same structures as the Odoo source code. If you want to propose a version 13 module, you should target version 13. So this shouldn't be new to you. Um, and that's it for the code organization side. Getting help, again, contributors mailing list, you should subscribe. It's a great way. There are also other specialized mailing lists. There's a big list there. So for example, there's a human resources mailing list that you can also consider subscribing depending on your particular interests. And today we have the Discord app. It's going to be used for the event, but we will stay on as a chat channel. So it's also a place you can go and ask for help. Moving to the next topic. So contributing code. So what kind of code contributions I have? So the first thing is, if you have an idea for a new app, it's better than having already a new app. If you have an idea, or if you have the need for a new app. So my workflow is I'm working for a customer and I identify a gap, something that the customer needs and Odoo does not, it's a future Odoo does not provide. The first thing I do is, so I consider using a existing community app, and if I don't find any, I will create a module for that. And when I propose a module, I consider having that module in dossier right from the beginning. So that's my way of thinking when working for customers. And the first thing I do is to search for existing apps that might fit my needs. And one of the tools I use is the Odoo Community App Store. It's not really an app store, so it's on this link on the Odoo Community /shop. It has this title because we use the e-commerce Odoo site to host this, but it's not really a shop. You can't buy applications. It works like an app index. So I believe I have this opened here. I don't. So let me. I actually have here a favorite already. So this is the app shop. So okay, there's also here the membership buy. You can buy memberships, but the main thing is all the modules are here. So if I need something for the first name, I can search. Actually, I have a typo here. First name. And this index is regularly updated from GitHub, and all the applications in the OCA repos should be available here. The nice thing is that uh, you look for keywords or module names. So you do a search, and you don't need to know what repo to look for because this searches across all the repos. So I can try find an interesting module for me. Let's see something here. HR employee first name and two last names. See, and this tells me the module name and tells me the versions it's available for. Okay, this module exists from version 10 to version 13. In version 13, it's hosted in the OCA HR. In version 12, it's also hosted in OCA HR. So in case it's changed repos, um, you will know what repo is being used for each version. So you have useful information. You know which repo to look into. And if you want, then you have here the README available, and you can then jump into the repo and try to find more. The thing is, it's hard to search for a module here using browsing the repos because you need to look at there's a module that may be interesting for you. Maybe you're targeting version 12, and there's an interesting module for you that was built for version 11 and no one ported it to version 12. So it's there, even, but if you look at the module list in version 12, it's not there. And you miss it because it will be much easier for you to pick up on the version 11 module and port it to version 12. That's much easier than creating something new out of the box. So you're wasting time if you do it. And the thing is, you might not discover the module was there. So that's the problem that the Odoo application index, the OCA app index solves. It's that makes it easier for you to locate modules. You might be looking at the wrong repo, or you might be looking at the wrong branch, and this makes it here you search at the same time across all repos and all branches. So you might even find this feature you want was available for version 8, and you can go to the version 8 module and use it as a basis to build your version 12 or 13 module. Okay. The second thing I do is here there are modules missing here on this index, and the modules missing here are the ones who were never merged. So it happens for modules to be contributed, but they end up not being merged because the person proposing the module didn't go to the trouble of going through the review and fixing the mistakes that were pointed out by the reviewers, or at some point we don't have enough reviewers and nobody insisted in the reviews, and the pull request is just open there. It's an old pull request. Nobody remembers about it, and the model was not merged. So it happened to me to develop a module that it was already developed by someone else and was not merged. So one thing I personally do, I search the pull requests for the keywords of the model I'm building. So I remove the is open filter. So this way I look at all the merged and not merged pull requests. And if I search for, for first name, I see that there's a version 12 that was merged. There's a version 13, though this is different. So I can see what kind of models were merged or not merged and for what versions. Because we usually in the pull request name, we add the version, and the add means it's adding a new module. So I can browse history if there's something similar to what I'm doing that was merged on earlier versions. Like I'm looking at version 12, that this was done for version 8 by someone, it was merged, or it was just a pending pull request. So this helps a lot. This is a good idea, is to look for modules. Remember, that's my opinion. It's better to recover a module that was already started, so you can pick up on where the other author left and continue the work. It's easier to do that than to start something completely new for yourself. Most of the time, at least. It depends on the quality of the contributed model. It could be trash and it could not be usable. But usually, it's not like that. Okay, so what kind of contributions you can do? I can identify here three types of contributions, and each of them has different complexity. So the first one, and this probably simpler, is you want to improve an existing module. So the module's already there, and what you want is you want to fix a bug because you're using it and you noticed something was not right, and that's usually simpler contributions. Or you want to improve a feature, so the module needs to do something more that you need. For example, I recently used a automatic task number for projects, and the automatically generated task number is read-only because it's generated, right? But I had a requirement from the customer that we could sometimes import from a spreadsheet that already had the task numbers there, and we wanted to be able to force those task numbers. So what I did was I proposed an improvement to the existing module to support this use case. So that's improving a feature of an existing module. Uh, an important thing here is we want to avoid having two modules doing the same thing or pretty much close the same thing. It's better to have one module supporting two features than to have two modules doing about the same thing, um, because that gets confusing. If someone goes to the OCA and wants a module to create automatic task numbers, and there are two separate implementations doing almost the same thing, what's the best choice? So that makes it more complicated for our code users. We prefer to have one that has modes and can support both. Sometimes this is not a good approach, and sometimes we need to allow two models do similar things, but in that case, it needs to be a decision that is made, and there must be some explanation of what's the pros and cons of each approach. But it can't be an accident. It must be a decision that was made, and we know, and there's no clear winner here. It depends on the case, and this must be explained, and then we can have these two models doing fulfilling the same function. Another contribution you can make, and this is good for the code sprint, it's adding tests. There's a lot of modules adding tests, so this is a good idea for a code sprint. People focusing on adding tests, if you don't do it usually. Um, and of course, improving documentation is also a good contribution. Like, you've been researching models that could fulfill the what you need, and the documentation was not clear. So you tested the models and you found how they worked. Now you have a clear understanding. Why not contribute to the README to add that explanation that you spent quite a few hours understanding that? So let's put that in a piece of text and contribute it to the module. So those are also very useful contributions. Most of the contributions here come from developers, and developers are bad at documenting things. So let's give them a help. And even more, I think developers are bad documenting their own code. When it comes to other people's code, I think it's easier. So this is a good idea for a contribution. The second kind of contribution you could make is to migrate existing modules. This is a good way to start. In this code sprint, there's a track dedicated to migrating modules to Odoo to the version 13. So I invite you. So it's a bit technical. There's a more complex step in the Git side because you need to export the full history from the version 13 branch and add it to your future branch on version 14, and then only then you can start the actual changes to the code. But from the functional point of view, you won't have a lot of problems. You just adjusting code that exists. So this is a good way to start and get familiar with the OCA contribution workflow. And of course, the frequent contribution kind is to add new modules, but I would say this is the hardest route to start because adding a new module, you'll have to comply with a lot, your code should comply with a lot of requirements, and it's harder to do this. So if your first contribution to the OCA is adding a new module, there's a good chance you'll feel frustrated with the process, okay, because you're not familiar with the process, you're not familiar with how it works with the code requirements or the coding standards, and this will be probably a frustration. So I recommend your first contributions to be something of the previous ones, and when you're feeling confident, propose a new module. Okay, I guess I need to speed up. Specifically on migrating modules, an important information if you go through this route. So there's issue that allows to track the migration status. We don't want two people repeating work and working on a migration of the same module. So we need some coordination to make sure if someone is already working on a module, you should not do it or unless they stopped work and you can pick from where they left. But we don't want two people doing the same work and then one of those people will go to the trash. So that's not efficient use of people's time. So what we do right now, if we go to the issues, I'm sorry, you were not seeing my slides here, okay? So this was I went through finding existing models, improving existing models, migrate existing models, and add a new model. So this was I was going through, and now specifically to migrating modules. So if you go to the issues, you'll have here some pin issues with the migrations. Migration to version 13. Okay, there's here one for the version 14. It's not pinned there yet. But there's an issue that starts with the list of modules and the ones that were migrated and the ones that are being worked on. So you have a link to the instructions of what the steps you need to migrate a module from version. That's the same link I have. Sorry, I have here. Okay. So you have a link. This is the list of modules to be migrated. None is being worked on. If some was worked on, we would have here the pull request number and the author of that pull request. And people here say announce that they are starting for working on this, and then from time to time, this is manual, a maintainer would update this. Okay, so this is the issue where people coordinate their efforts on migrating modules. So this gentleman here is working on these two. I think this is already merged and this is already merged too. Yes, this is merged for version 14. So actually a maintainer should edit this and say that so not everyone can do this, only maintainers. Say these two modules were maintained. Ideally, it would also here identify the corresponding pull request, but um, we don't have to do that now. So there's a requirement on the commit history. We should make sure that we bring in all the commits from the previous branch. There's some Git magic to do that. It's documented here. Um, in on version 12 to 13, the OCA introduced pre-commit. So pre-commit does automatic formatting of your code. Your Python code and XML files and JavaScript will be automatically reformatted, and this is automatic starting with version 13 contributions. Every code pushed will have this pre-commit reformatting done on the client side on your computer. So when you push the code, it's already formatted by these tools, but it was not the case for version 12. So on version 12 to 13, you should have a commit there with only the formatting changes, and then the actual changes needed to make it work on version 14 or on version 13 should be done on a separate commit. Okay, so this is important, and reviewers will be picky about this. Okay, so this is something important, something to keep in mind if you're contributing with migrations. Again, there's a guide document in the wiki that will help you with this. So workflow to contribute code. This is the high level view of the important topics. I'll go into each of these in the next slides. So on the workflow, what you need to do is you need to first get a fork of the repo, and then you'll need to create a future branch. Um, Actually, when creating the future branch, this is actually the other way around. You should be sure that suppose you're contributing code for version 4, for example, for a branch like version 14, you should pull the latest version 14, branch from there, or create a branch that's a copy of the latest version 14, edit your code, and then make a create a pull request. You should push the code, create a pull request, go through the review, introduce the fixes requested by reviewers, and finally you will get it merged. To go through this, there's the Git Flow part is important. Understanding the coding standards is important. Understanding Travis CI builds. So actually, there are we're now considering our automated checks are quite advanced right now, to the point that you can consider the automated build, Travis CI build, a reviewer. So the first reviewer you need to discuss with, it's the automated Travis CI builds. So some reviewers won't look at your code, won't start a review if you have a red build. They won't even look at it. So the first thing you need to do is look at the Travis CI build and see why it's red, fix it, and then you should be able to get a person to review the code. Okay. And code reviews, it's something that here it's worth discussing too. So on the contribution side, the first thing you need to do, so you know what repo you want to contribute to, and before you start anything, you need to fork that repo. So on GitHub, here at the top right, you have the fork button, and it will, if you haven't done it yet, it will propose you to fork. And I actually have already 2 forks. This is my individual fork. Um, and I also have a company shared fork. Nowadays, most of the work I do, I use this shared fork from the company, because that way it eases collaboration with other people on my team. So I can have other people submitting code to the module I started. If I'm busy with something else, other people can easily on my team can easily pick up where I left. So we usually use our contributing and creating our code, submitting our code to the fork. Why are forks needed? because you don't have write access to this repo. You can't submit code here. Only maintainers can write here. You have read-only access. So what's the solution for this? If you want to propose code, you need to make a copy of this repo. You submit, you write your changes to that copy, and then you create a pull request asking the maintainers of the original repo to accept those changes. So you can pull from here, but you can't push here. You can only push to here, to your personal repo forks. That's why you need a fork. Okay. So going back to the Git flow. Okay, Git flow. So on the Git side, how does this work? So you need to fork the target repository, and then you need to create a future branch. When you creating a future branch, make sure you make this branch a copy of the latest reference branch, 14.0, 13.0, 12.0. Make sure you have a copy of the latest one. Because your local copy will get old. You create it now, it's updated now. It won't be updated 1 month from now when you then come back to do a second contribution. So it's important to update it before you create the future branch. And then you create a draft pull request, commit the changes, push the changes, and during the review process, you'll need to add fixes and push fixes. Okay, so let's have a look at how this looks like from the command line. Okay, you should see my terminal here, and I'm at a work 14 directory, and there I cloned the HR repository. So actually, the clone should look like, let me, if you go to the repository, you have a button here and you can clone the repository. So you would usually do this. So you would git clone, and that would create you a repo. So actually, I'm going to do something like this. I have already here a repo. I can clone it to a different directory name. Okay. So on Git, you have these checkout repositories. I'm going to end. So I'm going to, this is HR1 is my repository. I'm going to move into it. Okay. So if I type git status, you see that my branch is up to date to origin 12.0. Now, two things here. What is origin? Origin is the remote. So Odoo has remotes. Git remote minus VV. And you see I have the origin as a remote to fetch and to push. So this is where my code came from. Okay. Now you can manage what origin means. It can be a different thing. So you could fork from your you could clone from your fork repository and not from the instead of doing it from the OCA one. I don't recommend that because the documentation you'll find, the guidelines, even for the migration process, they assume that origin matches the OCA repo. So don't change this. Keep this the default. You should, my recommendation, you should clone from the original OCA repo, and then you need to add your fork here. So in my case, let me go to my fork. So here, I'm going to navigate to my fork. So this is my, okay, for this presentation, let me instead use my personal fork. So that's not the one I use most of the time. So this, let me use my personal fork. And here, I can clone. So if I use the HTTPS address, every time I push code, I will be asked for a username and password, but you can set up SSH key. So this is explained in the documentation, in the GitHub documentation. You can go to your account, you can create a secret key that's be kept in your computer, and then you have a public key that you need to upload to your settings on GitHub. And once you do that, you don't need a user and password. So I'll use this for any practical purpose. You can use both, but SSH is more convenient if you go through the setup process up front. So, and if you work frequently with Git, you should set up the SSH, okay? So I can add the remote, git remote add, and I'm adding this, actually I need to name it. So this is, you can call it whatever you like. You could call it fork. You can call you can call it work or whatever. I found that what works better for me is to use the name of the GitHub user, because I sometimes need to pull code from other developers and I need to do the same thing, either remote to their repo. So where is this code hosted at? If I just use this rule, it gets simpler for me. I immediately know where this code is coming from on GitHub. Okay, so if I now list the remotes, so I get origin, that's the OCA, and I have Reis PT, that's my personal fork. So I'm going to pull code from here and I'm going to push code here. This is my fork where I push the code. And if I go to git status again, another thing is, okay, so I'm on branch 12.0. This is important because there's a default branch set on GitHub. It might not be the one you want to contribute to. So maybe you want to contribute to version 13 or 14. So you're on the wrong branch, okay? You need to make sure that you're contributing, you're creating your branch from the correct one. Okay, going here to the Git Flow. Um, so you need to fork, you need to clone locally, and you need to create a future branch. Okay, so for example, I'm going to make an improvement. Let me go to the source code. So let me check out, I'm on branch 12. Let me switch to branch 14. Maybe I don't have it here. Maybe I have git checkout. So this is the command to switch from a branch to another. Actually, I think this command now is actually named switch. You get the git switch command. This is new. I'm used to the old style, so bear with me. I'll use the checkout. Git checkout 14.0. Okay, so I moved to branch 14.0. So I can make sure if I have the latest version. So let me pull git pull. This might not work. Git might not know what to pull from if the branch is not linked to an upstream to the remote branch. So sometimes you might need to git pull and tell from where it should pull from. Git pull from the origin. Remember, origin is the OCA 14.0. So, okay. What it tells me, there's no new commits. So you're good. You're up to date. So now I can create a new branch. So let me git checkout -b. This creates a new branch. And now you need to add a branch name. There's no conventions on this. There used to be in Launchpad. a lot of years ago. Right now, there's no conventions here. You can use whatever you like. For me, I like to have a start with a version this is for. If I'm using a shared fork, like the company fork, I like to add the name of the author. So this is by me. And this is now a brief description that I can identify what this is. Random change. So this could be the name of the module contributing or the name of the module, what you're fixing. Of course, this doesn't work. Okay, so now I have a branch I can work on here, and I can start adding my changes. So I can actually I went to Git log. So you can see from the Git log that this is the latest revision you were at, and this is your head, and this head is where you are at in 14 minus the random change, and it also matches origin 14.0 and the local branch 14. So this is the upstream, this is the remote branch origin 14.0. So these are all in sync. The head matches these three branches, so this is all in sync. And you can push this to your fork. So I can git push. Minus u means tracking. When the later pushes, you don't need to provide information where to push at. It's safe in this branch. So minus u, I'm going to push it to my fork. I didn't make any changes. I could have done them, but so I'm pushing this and to the branch. So I'm creating this branch on this remote. Okay. And GitHub tells me that, okay, you pushed this to a fork. You can create a pull request for this by visiting this URL. So I can copy this URL, go to my browser. I also have a link here. See, a link here was proposed to create a pull request. So the GitHub identified I have a candidate for a pull request, or I can use this directly. And it's proposing me to create a pull request. So one important thing here, notice this is the default target branch. It's wrong, right? I don't want 12.0. GitHub will pick the default branch for this repo. It's still at 12.0. Maintainers will choose at some point to move it forward, but it's not the one I want. So you should always check this. And I'm proposing something for version 14. So I need to say that my target branch is version 14. Okay. Now there isn't anything to compare. Why? Because I didn't make any changes. So I have an empty change set. Uh, I could have here changes and I should review the changes. Anyway, I find it's a good practice when you start working. First thing you do is create a pull request and push regularly. That allows your colleagues or other people to know you're working on this. So I usually recommend people to create a oh, it doesn't allow me to create, there's no changes, it doesn't allow me to create a pull request right now. I would have a button here to create a pull request, but it's a good idea for you to create a pull request soon. Don't create a pull request when you finish your work and you're going to create the pull request. You can create a pull request earlier and mark it as a work in progress. And on earlier, we added on the title work in progress here. Today, the OCA has, GitHub has a feature that you can set your pull request as a draft. I don't know if I have one here. I could show you the button. Let me see if there's something for me. Ooh, this is old. And well, there's a button somewhere. I'm sorry, I can't locate it right now, but you can click on a button, make it a draft request. This will gray, and when on draft, this button is not available to maintainers, so it won't be merged by accident. So you can create a pull request that's a work in progress, and you let people know what you're doing. And that sometimes, while it's not expected to have a review, that will help people to do an early review, and maybe you're doing the wrong approach, and or you can invite some to discuss, okay, from the broad design point of view, is this correct, or maybe this was already done before. So it can save you a lot of work. An early review can save you a lot of work because it could spare you from building the wrong thing. Okay, it's not about if it's done properly, if it's doing something that if you're building the right thing. So that's very useful feedback. So you create a draft pull request, commit changes, push changes, and later on when you get feedback, you'll need to add the changes. And so you'll need to edit some files, and let's see here an example. So you So the reviewer said, oh, you forgot to add the description to your module, something like that. You should make a better description. So you make changes, and you should then commit or add. So I can git add. Commit messages are important. And now I have here one commit ready to push. If I type git log, I can see that my branch is here and the 14.0 branch started here. So this is the commit matching origin 14.0, and my current head and 14.0 branch is here. So I have this commit on top of this. So usually sometimes you might even push this, but the reviewer might say, okay, those fixes should be squashed into a single commit. For squashing, that's something that I think scares some people. They're not aware of squashing is. So squashing means that you should merge several commits into one. So that's using the command git rebase. So this is just a broad pointer. You should research on it. So git rebase interactive mode, and I can say rebase on 14.0. So what this says is that you're going to get branch 14, the upstream 14.0, and you're going to replay you're going to replay the commits you added on top of the whatever is in 14.0. So 14.0 might have moved forward, and you might have like merge conflicts, and you could have the need to refresh 14.0, pull it again, and then you want your code, your commits to be replayed on top of the latest 14.0 branch. Now you would do the rebase. The -I is interactive and lets you reformat your commits. You can change commit messages. You can squash commits in several commits into one. You can skip commits. So this is interactive editor. So right now, I only have one commit here on top of 14.0 in saying pick. I could say, for example, this is not a good idea. I could say to fix up, so squash meld into the previous commit. So I could squash. I could type an S and say this commit is squashed into the previous one. That would be, oops, this is not Vim, not used to this editor. And okay, cannot squash without the previous commit. So I can't do this right now because I have only one commit, but I hope you get the point. So git rebase, I'm going to abort the operation. So I have instructions here. So there's a lot to play around with Git. This is not supposed to be a Git training. Just give you some pointers of some important tools that you need to be aware of. Any questions here? It's a good time to ask you have them. Okay, so let's move forward. Um, Code contribution standards. So this is if you go through the easier improving existing module or migrating a module, you probably don't need to worry too much on this because that's already there. If you're contributing a new module, then this is something you'll need to be familiar. So the OCA code standards are based on the Odoo ones, but they have some additional requirements. So, and contribution standards you need to be aware of is the code module, the Odoo module structures. So how you organize the files, things like Python model files need to be inside the model subdirectory and views need to be inside the view. So there's some of these requirements you should follow. And on the Python model structure, we also have requirements for the READMEs, and we have requirements for the manifest keys. We have some additional manifest keys like the maintainer. The website should be the address for the repo. There are things like that that are specific to the OCA, but they're needed because of the automation we have afterwards. So we will automatically publish modules to the App Store, to the official App Store. We also publish the modules to PyPy, Python index, and we publish the modules to the OCA module index I shown you before. So these structures of the READMEs and the manifests are needed because of those automations. Then you have the Python code requirements. So we adhere to the general Python standards like PEP8 and best practices. So there's instructions here related to Python programming in general, related to the Odoo framework programming specifically. Um, there's a lengthy document here on the guidelines that also incorporates things that are best practices, like avoiding SQL injections if you are running SQL commands on your code. Actually here, this is the Odoo document link, and this is the OCA document. So I invite you to browse on that. It's probably too much to read in one go, but with time you should get familiar with it. So there, on the XML code right now, there are some requirements there. I think in the tag IDs, when the ID and the model on the record tags, the sequence, there are some details there. Not a lot here. On Git, the change sets, it's also there's important to know is that you should, as much as possible, have one separate pull request for each model touch. You should avoid having a pull request that changes several modules at the same time. It's not that there might be exceptions, but as a general rule, don't do it. The second thing is try to get your change set as small as possible. It's easy to review smaller change sets. And remember, for you to get merged, you need reviews. And if you get huge change sets, That will scare reviewers away because it's a lot of work to review, and you'll have problems getting reviews. So if you can get smaller change sets in your contributions, that will be helpful for you. Um, so having a single module per pull request, it's a step towards making us a smaller pull request. And then on Git commits, um, you need to avoid. You would like the Git history. Ideally, the Git log history should read like a change log, really. So that the git commit message should not say what you change in the code, but it should be meaningful in why you changed it. Because so it's something you should present to the end user and say, okay, this fixes this problem, or this adds this feature. And it's not easy. So you shouldn't write something like edited the respartner.py file. So that doesn't mean anything. You should say added the reference field to the partner model, something like that. That's more meaningful. So you want to be able to type git log and understand why that change is there. If you can, if you do that, then you have a useful Git history. And remember, these are shared projects. So you're working on projects that someone else did commits. You're doing commits that someone else will read and use in the future. So understanding why the change was made, uh, or having at least a good clue of why it was made, that's useful. The document covers all of this, okay? Code automated checks. So this is important. Travis CI, and I think we can open it. Travis CI is our runs automated checks. So you can see this pull request here. It has a red build. So if I have a red build, this means probably I won't even get a reviewer, because we say, okay, this is still a work in progress, because the minimum I would expect from the person proposing it's that he provides me a green build for me to start working on. And why is this build wrong? You can go to the details. Like the first reviewer you have to discuss with, it's Travis CI. So you'll push the code, you'll give you a red build, you need to understand why, you need to fix it and try again. So, and at the beginning, this will probably be several iterations until you get a green build. But the good news is you have Travis CI is always working for you. So you don't need for someone to be available. Travis CI is always there, and he's doing our next review. So I have here test builds. This is running tests. My tests are passing, meaning that the module is installed and tests run correctly. I have on the lint checks, I have a red build. So I missed some guidelines or formatting. So if I go to the log, I should read it and understand what's happening. Okay. So here are some comments. Dangerous view replaced without priority. So here are some messages. Not all of these are related to my module. I would probably only get a red build if my module has issues. So this is version 8. Version 8 was where we introduced this, and there's a lot of errors there from other modules when we introduced it. So there's a lot of errors. So this is too much. You don't find these big messages nowadays. Test pilint found 7 errors. These are unrelated to our module because we're based on a red build already. So let's look at something a bit more meaningful. Let me see. Okay, there's a red build here. So actually, This is not a red build, so the CI checks are green. This is the run bot is a tool. It was the run bot is these are not really checks. It just means that we were able to build a run bot and we can interact. We can dynamically inspect this pull request there. Um, and this is the coverage report. So the test coverage was reduced. That's why it's a red build, but Travis CI is okay. I don't have errors on the Travis CI. I'm looking for errors on the Travis CI. So let me look here at an older one. Let's look at this alpha. So this probably, okay, has a red build on Travis CI. See, there's a lint check, tests pass, but the lint check fails. Let's go down. Okay, it has left a lot of errors. So like this, API 1 deprecated. So in this file, on this line, I have API 1 deprecated. So this model is using API.1 and it was deprecated for this version. You shouldn't use it. So here, this file is missing a new line. I think this is at the end of the files. Translation string, issues. Yeah, so if you need help reading the errors, you can ask to the reviewers, they'll help you. Okay, the important thing to know is that you will find a reference to the file and the line of code with that issue and the issue found. That you should get started with that. So, and if still don't understand why the issue is there, you can ask for help. Okay, now starting on version 13, we have pre-commit hooks. So these checks and even automatic formattings are done when you run git commit. When you run git commit, it triggers the pre-commit hooks and it runs automatic formatting. It runs checks, and if something is wrong, it will interrupt your commit. So like if you forget a print statement or forget about the PDB breakpoint in your code, it will break the commit and the checkers will identify that and will prevent you from doing the commit. Okay, so this is done on your side. So the chances on version 13 and 14, the chances that you commit, that you push code with lint errors are minimum. Okay, are very minimum. You will have those problems with version 12 and earlier. So these are improvements that have been done. On version 12, you'll have these automated checks on Travis CI server side alone. On version 13, 14, these checks are run locally on your machine and then you push. And Travis CI here is important for the actual tests part. Make sure the tests run. Okay. Now, code reviews. So this is important step. It's actually, I would say that going through the code review, it's the main, your main thing in the pull requests. So writing the code is just the beginning of it. Going through the code review is the important part. And it's been more than once that at the code review, I gave up on a module because someone pointed out there was a better way to do that, or out of the box, we could achieve that with some smarter configuration. So I've changed my mind several times based on code reviews from other people. So go with an open mind. Okay, that's something important. And the first thing you want, look, okay, who can review? That's important. Anyone can review. You don't have to be a maintainer. You don't have to be on the OCA board. You don't have to be an OCA member. You don't have to be a OCA experienced, Odoo experienced developer. You can be a functional person and do tests using Runbot, or you can be so. There are no requirements for doing reviews. There's a requirement on who can do the merged, but anyone can review. So getting reviews is the second thing. That's not for granted. You need to earn your reviews. So you need to ping people. You need to invite people. And most importantly, I think this is an unwritten rule. That's a rule I follow, and a lot of people follow. For me to give a review, or for me to get a review, I first need to review others' code. So I try to do 1 or 2 reviews for each review I request to someone. So before you ask reviews, try to review other people's code. And then you are entitled to get a review because it's work. You're asking for work for other people. And the best way to pay back that work is to review back their code. Okay? That does not mean let's just cross approve our pull requests. It's not like that. It's just um, um, earn your reviews. Now, code review guidelines is something. There's a few there. I think there's some room for improvement. My But here are some different review types. Um, on the review guidelines, one thing I can tell is that it's okay for you to challenge the reviewer's opinion. So if something is opinion based, you're good to challenge it. If something says, I would prefer this doing somewhere else, you are good to say, okay, I don't share that opinion. So that's okay because it's also a discussion. The reviewer can bring you ideas, can bring you suggestions, and you might accept some of them, might not accept other of them. If something is wrong in your code, you should fix it. But if it's something that's opinion based, or if the viewer says, okay, we should go further and also do this, you don't have to implement it. That could be a change made later on by you or by other person. It could be another pull request, but be open and know that this is a discussion and you can push back on things you don't agree. Okay. Now, one thing that's important for reviews is scope overlap. I mentioned before, we try as much as possible to avoid modules that overlap in scope. That's not possible every time. So, and it's okay to accept 2 models overlapping. The thing is, we should be aware of that. And ideally, we should include in the README, in the documentation, guidelines on when to choose one approach versus the other. So this is the important thing. We don't want just to randomly have 3 modules that all make automated task numbers, and then we don't know which model is the better one to use, or if you're contributing to one, you don't know which one you want to improve. Okay, so by default, it's better to improve another feature to an existing module than add a second module. But there are exceptions to that. So reviews can be done by functional people. So this means someone who goes to the pull request and let me show you. There's a button there. So I can here, I have a button for the CI run bot, and I can go to the run bot and connect to an instance with this pull request on, and I can do functional tests. So I don't need to be a developer. This is a service provided by the OCA. We have a runbot server, and I can test this pull request and see if it works as expected and report errors. So a functional person can do reviews. They are not only code reviews, and they can even request you to improve our documentation. See, how am I supposed to test this if I don't have enough details on the README? And that's a valid consideration for a review. Now, you can also have technical reviews. So know that the automated checks already do a lot. So you can find these overall design patterns if they're fine. Um, and of course, ideally, testing with runbot, that's for the functional review. But if ideally people should add tests to their codes, that would give us a better assurance that it's working properly. That's something we need to improve and require better testing. We already do test coverage, but we don't put a red line saying, okay, you need a minimum test coverage. I think that's not there yet, but it should go that way. Okay, code reviews. Don't stress on this. This is important, and this is a discussion. Keep an open mind. Okay, we are a bit. I don't know, Simone. We have 5 minutes left.
Yes, 5 minutes left. This is Jordi.
Okay, Jordi, thank you. Okay, I think we have enough
Hey,
time.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so well, we have enough time. We have 5 minutes for question and answer if you want. But it's up
Okay.
to you.
Okay, I have 2 slides more. Let me run through them
Yep.
and open the Q&A. And if I don't have enough questions, I can discuss. This is my last one. It's a blank slide, and it's a
Okay.
good discussion topic too. So I'll stop my Q&A here. Let me go through this one in 1 minute. Finally, merging a pull request. So you need, usually there's a rule for getting a pull request merged. There's a minimum waiting time. I believe it's 2 days. It can be 5. Not sure if this has been shortened. Why? Because we want to give enough time for people following a repo to have a look at your pull request. If it's there for more than 5 days and it's already got some approvals, it's okay to be merged. So, but there's a minimum time we try to give people to not rush on, especially for a new module. So if it's a fix, we probably can shortcut a bit of the time. If it's a new module, we think we want more eyes on it and have people have comment on this new module. The merge requirement, I think it's 2 days minimum with 2 reviews, or 5 days with 3 reviews. We're trying to lower this. And my rule of thumb is that we should consider a green build like 1 reviewer. So we should cut the requirement for one reviewer less. But this is something that is under discussion. There's a document, this document around the development status also discusses this. And we have the OCA board has been working on a proposal to reduce the merge requirements for some module maturity levels. Okay, we have this document, we have a second iteration of it. I invite you to read it. What this module does says the merge requirements will depend on the maturity level of the module. A mature module will have more merge requirements on number of views, for example, than a beta module. So right now, you can tag your module as beta, and it will have less requirements for reviews. I think that on a beta module, the maintainer can merge it just with a green build with no reviews. I'm not 100% sure. The details are here. I'm not 100% sure because we have a work in progress, and now I'm mixing up our work in progress with the currently published document. Okay, so but know that there are maturity levels, and the merge requirements are lower for beta or alpha modules compared to stable and mature modules. And we also introduced the maintainer role. So even if you don't have a full write access to a repo, you can be the maintainer for specific modules. That's a tag that's a key in the manifest. You can ask yourself to be a maintainer, and then you can use the OCA bot to merge changes to that module you maintain. So it's more fine-grained on who are the maintainers in particular modules in a big repo. And the GitHub bot has commands. You just type a message like /OCA bot merge, and the OCA bot will do the merge for you. So this is a reference for that information. If you're a maintainer, you sure want to look at this. And it's important you can ask yourself to be a maintainer or propose yourself to be a maintainer if you've been contributing a lot to some modules. Okay. Good. So let's open the Q&A. We have a few minutes left. There's a topic here on how to incorporate the OCA in your delivery workflow. And But let's start with your questions before I go into this in more detail. And please make questions. Anyone? No questions? Remember, there's a code sprint going on. It's a great way to try to put this in practice. So this is a bit an overview. I try to show you a bit some of the Git commands we use, but I'm aware it's a bit light on that. It's not a full tutorial. Okay. Oh,
Thank you,
okay.
Daniel.
Yes, please.
So we invite everyone to join Discord. There is a Track One Trainings channel that you can continue to have some discussion in there. And Daniel, then if anyone has a specific questions, maybe then you can set up something in parallel.
Mm-hmm. Sure. You can tag me on the Discord chat, and if you want, we can yes, we can set up something in parallel in case of need.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
Okay.
Good on.
Thank you.